Hi guys, Chad Troftruben here, and this is Chad Chat. Today's episode focuses on how to create a good cartoon screenplay. I was actually asked this question a few times from a few different users in the past week, and even before. So, since the question was asked in different ways, I decided to compile a list of 5 points that should help you when writing out a cartoon screenplay. Now, these are methods that I use and I find useful, and this is by no means an extensive list. This is just a beginning to help you out. There's many more tips out there. And also, the tips I will provide are in no particular order. So number 1, number 2, it doesn't matter. These are just general tips to help you out. So anyway, let's get started with today's episode. Tip number 1. And this is going to be a bit cliche because I'm sure it's been said many times in the past, but I still feel it holds true, and that is to write what you know. Now, there are a few different points to this. First, if you don't know what you're writing about, then what are you writing about, really? But let's say, for instance, that you are basing a story in a different country, and you want this to be a realistic, maybe a drama of a movie or a cartoon. So you have this country that you've never been to before and that you know very little about. Maybe you just heard some stories or you just know what you've heard in the news or whatever. Well, if you're trying to create a realistic setting for your cartoon, you might want to do some research on that country because in order to convince the audience of your story and to create a sound universe out of this, you're going to want to know what your setting is. Now, this doesn't only extend to environment and settings. I'm just using that as an example. Let's say, for instance, that you are creating a character. Well, maybe you want to base this character on someone that you know. That might make it easier to write for. Let's say you know someone that's a bit eccentric, a friend, a family member. You could take those personality traits that that person has and incorporate them into a new cartoon character. And that's something I've actually done myself. Mr. Bennick's class, which is a cartoon series I am currently developing, that character, Mr. Bennick, and other characters in that series are actually based off of people that I know. I've just taken some sort of personality traits that I've seen from these people, and I've tweaked them, and I've just incorporated them into this story. Now, when I was in this classroom setting, the series it's based off of, I was in high school, so I took liberties there. I made it a grade school instead. And of course, I exaggerated a lot of the character traits, but it got me started and allowed me to build a foundation that I think people could relate to. So tip number 1, write what you know. Tip number 2 is length. Now, I have 2 points to this. First of all, when writing a screenplay, if you're writing it in screenplay format, and if you want to write your screenplay in screenplay format but don't know how, I would recommend checking out Celtics, which is a free screenwriting software that basically puts all of your work into screenplay format for you. But if you're writing in screenplay format, it's important to understand that 1 page typically equals roughly 1 minute of footage. So if you have a 10-page screenplay, you're looking at about a 10-page, or a 10-minute rather, video. So that's important to say because my next point comes in terms of kind of viral marketing and that sort of thing. If you're looking to make it big on YouTube, or if you're looking to catch a wide audience on YouTube to, have your video go viral, I would recommend that you keep the length of your screenplay and your video between 2 to 3 minutes long, roughly around that time. Because the thing is, and let's face it, and I'm sure many of you know this, because of our digital age, because of the instant gratification you get from YouTube and other venues like that, people want things like that. They want it quick, they want it now, they want to see it, they want to be done with it, they want to share it, they want to be gone. And that's just the reality of it. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't make longer cartoons for YouTube. I mean, for instance, my episodes of Mr. Bennick's class range from 8 to 10 minutes. So I obviously don't follow that rule all the time, I should say. But the thing is, if you're looking to just grab an audience, you're going to want to keep an eye on the length. because, again, it's instant gratification. That's how it always goes. But of course, if you're looking for another venue, let's say a film festival, they'll of course have their own set of rules, like they can only be such and such minutes long and all that. So again, just keep in mind that you need one page for 1 minute of footage, and that YouTube videos, if you want to grab a wide audience, should be shorter. Tip number 3, and this is a bit subjective, but keep it within your means. And by this I mean, let's say for instance you have this awesome idea. You want to have this epic battle between thousands of soldiers in this really dynamic background. There's an earthquake going on, there's crap flying around, and it's just going to be the coolest thing ever seen. Well, that sounds great on paper, but you have to keep in mind, and the reason why I'm saying this is because I'm assuming, since you're starting out with animation, and since the question is geared towards cartoon animation screenplays, that once you write it, you're going to be the one that's animating and directing it. So once you write it out, you have to take all that stuff you wrote and put it on the screen and get it all to work that's pleasing to the audience. And so if you have all this stuff going on that's near impossible to animate, it's not going to be good. You're not going to be able to do it. You're going to get discouraged. You're not going to be able to capture that vision. So I'm not saying to limit yourself. I'm just saying to be cautious about letting your imagination go wild. You want to keep things within your means. You want to keep it so that you can actually achieve it. You want to make it so that it gets done within the next decade. If you have a lot of work going into this, which is fine, you might just want to be cautious, though, about what you write, and be aware of all that stuff you're writing is going to have to be done somehow. And I just want to say it one more time, just so there's no confusion. Don't limit yourself, and you should always push yourself to do better. Just don't become overwhelmed with things that are impossible to achieve at your current skill level. Tip number 4 is be adaptable. Now, the thing is, you might have an idea in your head, and you get it done, and you think it's the best idea in the world. You might let it go for a week and come back, and you look at it, and you're like, what was I thinking? This is terrible. You're going to have to rewrite and tweak it. So that does happen a lot. But another thing, and this does kind of relate to my third point that I just made, is that if you do write something that is really out of your means, you're going to have to adapt and rewrite it so that the screenplay works within your means to animate. So that's another thing. And also, it doesn't hurt to have others look at your screenplay. Now, I'm not saying you should be driven by every other person's opinion out there, but if you give your screenplay to someone and they look at it and they have a suggestion or an idea that you like, you're going to have to be aware, that you're going to have to make changes to the screenplay. Alternatively, let's say you're working on a project together. It's a joint project. You're going to have to be adaptable in that setting as well, because you're going to have to listen to other input. And, with that setting, it's important to do that because it's a team effort. Or if you're writing something for an animator that's, not you, you're going to have to, of course, listen to their creative differences as well. And finally, too, let's say you're doing this for a client. Let's say you're actually being paid to do this. Let's say it's a commercial. You're going to, of course, have to abide by the client's wishes and fulfill what they want. Sometimes that doesn't happen. Sometimes they want something and you completely disagree, and you have to be adaptable. So that is my 4th tip for you. Tip number 5, and this doesn't apply to everything you'll do. I would say 90% of it should, though, because it's important, even though it might not seem like it. And that is to write multiple drafts of your screenplay. And this builds off of the other 2 tips that I have laid forth so far. So basically, when you get done writing your script, you should think about coming back to it and maybe writing out a second draft, because sometimes things can work better than you have down on paper currently. And that's why it's good to sometimes have someone else look at your stuff. They can provide input on what they think works and what doesn't. Now, that doesn't mean that you should abide by every single thing they say, but again, it's just something I feel that is beneficial to a writer, is to have multiple drafts and come to a better conclusion with their screenplay. Now, sometimes you don't have that luxury. If you're working on a commercial project for a client and they need it by a deadline, sometimes you need to just go with the first draft that you have or that they provide, and you just need to push through and get it done. And that's not ideal in a creative setting, but in a business setting, that's sometimes how it is. Now, on the subject of this, I will say that I go through multiple drafts on my screenplays all the time. For instance, my series, Mr. Bennett's Class, the first episode, I probably went through about 3 or 4 different drafts before I arrived at the conclusion that I wanted to do the current draft that you now see in the first episode. And that's because I would write something out. Sometimes a character wouldn't work quite how I wanted to. I needed to adjust his or her personality. Sometimes the scenes wouldn't flow together. I had to figure out how to go from point A to point B to point C and so on. And sometimes it just, worked better when I thought about different ways to piece it all together. And the thing is, this is kind of a process that you will probably get used to as you continue forth in writing. And sometimes it's best just to set a screenplay aside, wait a couple weeks or a couple days, whichever, pick it up again and see how it looks to you. Sometimes when you're invested in something for so long, it's best to put it down and come back to it later with a fresh set of eyes and try to look at it objectionally. Because sometimes when you can become really attached to something or you can become really attached to an idea, it can be hard to let that go or to tweak it so it flows a different way. So that is my final tip to you. I do have one more tip, although I wouldn't really consider it a tip, I guess, is with all of these lessons and with just screenwriting in general, have fun with it. You should have fun writing out your screenplay. After all, you're doing this for a reason. You're creating cartoons, you're writing for a reason, and I would hope to be part of it would be to have fun. That's what I do it for. I find it enjoyable. And if you have fun with it, the audience will pick up on that. If you're having a miserable time with it and you hate it and it sucks and you don't want to do it, but you do it anyway, the audience will definitely pick up on that, and they probably won't like it as well either. It's just something that you have to adjust to, and I'm sure most of you will have fun with this as you get into it and, work out all the little mechanical things that writing entails. But anyway, those are my 5 writing tips for you guys. I hope you find them useful. If you have more questions, please visit me at chatchat.incredibletutorials.com. You can also follow me on Twitter. I also have Google+ and Facebook pages for you to subscribe to as well. And on a final note, this is the final Chat for the 2011 year. I will be back in 2012. I know, don't cry. I know you'll miss me, but fear not. I will be back with new chats, new tutorials, and new animations. So I'll see you guys in 2012, and happy holidays.